The evening shift at Joe's Diner was winding down, the usual dinner rush giving way to the quiet hours when only the regulars dropped by for coffee and pie. Lily wiped down the counter for the 100th time that day, humming softly to herself as the scent of fresh brewed coffee and apple pie filled the air. Through the slightly foggy windows, the city lights twinkled like stars, casting a warm glow over the worn but clean tables. The bell of the door chimed softly as an elderly man shuffled in from the cold. His clothes were wrinkled and worn. A brown jacket that had seen better days, pants that needed pressing, and scuffed shoes that had walked many miles. "Welcome to Joe's," Lily called out with genuine warmth in her voice. She had worked here for 5 years now, and something about this particular customer caught her attention. Despite his shabby appearance, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. The man chose a corner booth, settling in carefully as if his joints ached from the cold. A few other customers glanced his way, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment. Lily grabbed a menu and her coffee pot, approaching his table with her characteristic friendly smile. "Coffee to warm you up," she offered, already reaching for a cup. The man looked up, and Lily was struck by the intelligence in his eyes. They were sharp and observant, seeming somehow out of place with his weathered appearance. "Yes, please," he replied, his voice surprisingly cultured. "And whatever you recommend for dinner. I trust the judgment of someone who takes such good care of their workplace." He gestured slightly to the gleaming counter and neatly arranged condiments. Lily felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Well, our meatloaf is famous in this neighborhood. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans, all made from scratch. And maybe finish with a slice of apple pie. Just came out of the oven an hour ago." The man smiled, and for a moment, his whole face transformed. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." "Lily," she supplied, writing down his order. "I'll have that right out for you." As she turned to place his order, the bell chimed again. This time, 3 young men in expensive suits strode in, laughing loudly about some joke. They chose a table near the window, their designer watches glinting under the diner's lights. Lily noticed how they looked around the place with barely concealed disdain, as if they'd wandered into Joe's by mistake. She served them with the same friendliness she showed all her customers, though their dismissive attitudes made her heart sink a little. As she walked away, she could hear them whispering and snickering, their eyes darting toward the elderly man in his worn clothes. The night air grew colder outside, and more regulars drifted in. Old Mr. Chen with his evening tea, Mrs. Rodriguez picking up her usual turkey club to go, and a couple of college students with their laptops and endless coffee refills. The diner had a rhythm to it, a comfortable predictability that Lily had grown to love. But something felt different about tonight. Maybe it was the way the elderly man savored each bite of his meal, as if dining at a 5-star restaurant instead of a humble diner. Or perhaps it was the growing volume of the businessman's whispers and laughs, carrying an edge of cruelty that made other customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. Little did Lily know that this ordinary evening was about to become anything but ordinary. As she refilled coffee cups and checked on her customers, forces were aligning that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others in ways she could never imagine. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments, and tonight, in this simple diner, something extraordinary was about to unfold. The evening had been relatively peaceful at Joe's Diner until 3 young businessmen walked in, their expensive suits and loud voices filling the quiet space. They took a table near the window, directly across from where the elderly man in his worn clothes was enjoying his simple meal of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Lily, who had been working at the diner for the past 5 years, couldn't help but notice how the 3 men kept glancing at the older customer, whispering and snickering among themselves. She tried to ignore their behavior while refilling coffee cups and taking orders, but their voices grew progressively louder. "Look at that guy," one of them said, barely attempting to lower his voice. "You'd think a place like this would have some standards about who they let in." His companions laughed, the sound sharp and mean in the quiet diner. Lily's hands tightened around her coffee pot as she heard another one chime in. Maybe we should donate some clothes to him. That jacket looks like it's been through a war. More laughter followed, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like broken glass. The elderly man kept his head down, quietly cutting his meatloaf into small, neat squares. But Lily could see his shoulders hunching slightly, his movements becoming more mechanical. Other customers were beginning to look uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact. The third businessman, emboldened by his friend's amusement, raised his voice even further. Hey buddy, the homeless shelter is 3 blocks down. The cruel joke echoed through the diner, causing several patrons to wince. Something snapped inside Lily. She had seen enough bullying in her life to know that staying silent meant being part of the problem. Setting down her coffee pot with a firm clink, she walked over to their table. Excuse me, gentlemen, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I couldn't help but overhear your comments. In this diner, we treat all our customers with respect, regardless of what they're wearing or how much money they might have. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice remained clear and firm. The men stared at her, clearly not expecting any pushback. The one who had made the homeless shelter comment recovered first, his face reddening. We're paying customers here. We can say what we want. Lily stood her ground, her chin lifted slightly. Actually, no, you can't. Not if it means harassing other customers. Everyone deserves to eat their meal in peace. If you can't manage that basic courtesy, I'll have to ask you to leave. Are you serious? Another one scoffed. Do you know who we are? We could buy this whole place. I don't care if you own half the city, Lily replied calmly. In here, everyone gets treated with the same respect. Those are our rules. The businessmen exchanged glances, their faces a mix of embarrassment and anger. Finally, they stood up, throwing their napkins on the table. Keep the change, one muttered, tossing a few bills down. You'll need it. They stormed out, leaving their barely touched meals behind. Lily watched them leave, her heart still pounding. She knew those bills wouldn't cover their full check, let alone a tip, but she didn't care. Walking over to the older man's table, she gently placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. I'm sorry about that, sir, she said softly. Your dessert's on the house tonight. The man looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw his eyes clearly. They were kind and surprisingly sharp, with a hint of something she couldn't quite read. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice warm and cultured. Not many people would have done what you just did. Lily smiled, feeling her nerves settle. Well, my grandmother always said that staying quiet when you see something wrong is the same as saying it's okay. I just couldn't do that. Little did she know that this simple act of kindness, this moment of standing up for what was right, would set in motion events that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others in ways she could never have imagined. After the businessman stormed out, the diner slowly returned to its peaceful atmosphere. Lily was wiping down a nearby table when she noticed the elderly man gesturing for her attention. With a warm smile, she walked over to his table, coffee pot in hand. Would you mind sitting down for a moment? He asked softly, his voice carrying a gentle authority she hadn't noticed before. That is, if you're not too busy. Lily glanced around the nearly empty diner. It was almost closing time, and her only other customer was old Mr. Chen, who always lingered over his tea until the last possible moment. I can spare a few minutes, she replied, sliding into the booth across from him. The man folded his hands on the table, studying her with kind eyes. What you did earlier, standing up to those young men, that took real courage, he said. Most people would have just looked the other way. Lily shrugged, feeling slightly embarrassed by the praise. It wasn't right, what they were doing. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. She fiddled with her apron, then added, My little girl, she was bullied at school last year because her shoes had holes in them. Nobody stood up for her then. I promised myself I'd never be the person who stays quiet. The man's eyes softened. You have a daughter. Yes. Lily's face lit up, the way it always did when she talked about her child. She's 8. Smart as a whip and twice as determined. She wants to be a doctor and a teacher, both at the same time. She laughed softly. I keep telling her she can do anything she sets her mind to, even if it means inventing a whole new kind of job. You work 2 jobs to support her? He asked, noticing the slight shadows under her eyes. Lily nodded. Here at the diner in the evenings, and I clean offices in the morning. It's not easy, but we make it work. She straightened her shoulders proudly. We've got a roof over our heads, food on the table, and she's got all her school supplies. That's what matters. And what about your dreams? He asked gently. Surely you must have some of your own. Lily was quiet for a moment, surprised by the question. Nobody had asked her that in a long time. Well, she said slowly, I've always wanted to open a place for kids in the neighborhood. Somewhere they could go after school, get help with homework, have a hot meal. Maybe learn some useful skills. She smiled wistfully. There's this old community center that's been shut down for years. Every time I pass it, I imagine fixing it up, making it something special. The man listened intently, nodding. That's quite a vision. What's stopping you? Oh, reality. Lily chuckled, but there was no bitterness in her voice. Money, mainly, and time, and knowledge. I never finished college, don't know the first thing about running a business. She glanced at her watch and stood up. Speaking of reality, I should get back to work. Can I get you anything else? The man shook his head, reaching for his wallet. No, thank you. The meal was excellent. He pulled out some cash, leaving it neatly under his coffee cup. Keep the change. Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful evening, Lily said, turning to check on Mr. Chen. It's Robert, the man called after her. And thank you again, for everything. As he walked out into the night, Lily cleared his table, thinking about their conversation. When she picked up his coffee cup, she nearly dropped it. Under it was $100 bill. She rushed to the door, but he was already gone. What Lily didn't know was that Robert was still watching from his car across the street, making a phone call. John? Yes, I need you to look into something for me. There's an old community center I want to know more about, and a remarkable young woman named Lily who works at Joe's Diner. Yes, first thing tomorrow. I think we might have found exactly what we've been looking for. Over the next week, Robert's trusted assistant John delved deep into learning everything he could about Lily. What he discovered left him more impressed with each passing day. Sitting in Robert's penthouse office, overlooking the city lights, John spread out his findings across the mahogany desk. You won't believe what I've found out about her, John said, excitement clear in his voice. She's been working at that diner for 5 years, never missed a shift except when her daughter had pneumonia 2 winters ago. Even then, she arranged coverage for all her shifts and made up the time later. Robert leaned forward in his chair, genuinely intrigued. Tell me about her community work. That's where it gets really interesting, John replied, pulling out several photographs. Every Sunday, rain or shine, she volunteers at the local soup kitchen. But here's the remarkable part. She brings her daughter along. The little girl helps serve drinks and talks to the elderly folks who come in. They've never missed a Sunday in 3 years. Robert smiled, remembering Lily's words about teaching her daughter important values. What about her financial situation? John shuffled through some papers. She lives modestly but manages her money incredibly well. Never missed a rent payment, always pays her bills on time. She's got a small savings account that she adds to every month, even if it's just $5. And get this, she sets aside a little money each month to buy school supplies for kids in her daughter's class who can't afford them. The community center she mentioned. I checked it out personally, John said, pulling out more photos. It's been abandoned for about 8 years. The building structure is sound, but it needs significant renovation. The interesting part is that Lily's not the only one who's had her eye on it. Several local parents have been trying to petition the city to reopen it, but nobody's had the funds or the plan to make it happen. Robert walked to the window, looking out at the city below. What about her education? She completed 2 years of college before having to drop out when her daughter was born, John explained. Maintained a 3.8 GPA while working part-time. Her professor's notes say she was one of their most promising students, particularly in business and social work classes. Any red flags? Robert asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't expecting any. John shook his head. Nothing. If anything, the more I dig, the more impressive she becomes. Last winter, when their heating broke down, instead of using her emergency savings to fix it, she and her daughter stayed with an elderly neighbor who needed help after surgery. They helped the neighbor, saved money on heating, and got their own heating fixed when their tax refund came in. She's resourceful, boss. Robert nodded slowly, remembering how Lily had stood up for him in the diner. The daughter. Sweet kid, good grades, helps other students who struggle with math. Teachers say she's got natural leadership qualities. She started a little club where kids share their lunch with classmates who sometimes don't have enough to eat. Did it so quietly that nobody felt embarrassed about participating. Walking back to his desk, Robert picked up a photo of the abandoned community center. What's the asking price for this building? John raised an eyebrow. The city's asking $300,000, but it needs at least that much again in renovations. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Get our real estate team to look into it, Robert said, still studying the photo. And have someone draft up a business plan for a community center. Make it sustainable. After-school programs, adult education classes, job training workshops. The kind of place that could really change lives. You really think she can handle something like that? John asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Robert smiled, remembering the quiet strength in Lily's voice when she'd stood up to those businessmen. I think she's been handling everything life's thrown at her with grace and wisdom. She just needs an opportunity to show what she can really do. Should I set up a meeting? Not yet, Robert replied, his eyes twinkling. I think it's time I paid another visit to that diner first. Sometimes the best way to help someone isn't just to give them what they want, but to help them achieve what they're capable of. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at the diner. It was another quiet evening when the bell above the door chimed. Lily was restocking sugar packets when she heard someone clear their throat behind her. She turned around with her usual warm smile, only to freeze in surprise. There stood a distinguished-looking man in an impeccably tailored suit. Something about his eyes seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place him. He smiled at her, and suddenly it clicked. It was the same gentle expression she'd seen on the elderly man from that memorable evening. Good evening, Lily, he said softly, his voice immediately recognizable. May I have a seat? Lily's eyes widened as she finally made the connection. You're the man from before, she managed to say. But you look so different. He chuckled, smoothing his silk tie. Amazing what a change of clothes can do. Mind if we talk? Still stunned, Lily gestured to an empty booth. As they sat down, she couldn't help but notice how other customers were stealing glances at him. His presence commanded attention, yet there was still that same kindness in his eyes she remembered. I don't understand, she said, shaking her head slightly. That night, you were testing something, he finished for her. I do it sometimes, dress down, visit regular places, see how people behave when they think I'm nobody important. He paused, his expression growing serious. Most people treat me very differently when I'm in this suit. But you're the same person, Lily said firmly, then blushed. I'm sorry, I don't even know your name. Your real name, I mean. Robert Wellington, he said simply, watching her reaction carefully. Lily's jaw dropped slightly. Everyone knew that name, the tech billionaire who'd revolutionized renewable energy technology. She'd read about him in newspapers, seen him on TV, but never in a million years would she have imagined. "You left me $100 tip," she said weakly, and immediately wanted to kick herself. Of all the things to say to a billionaire. Robert laughed, a genuine, warm sound. "That's what you're focusing on? Not the fact that I could buy this entire city block without blinking." "Well," Lily said, recovering her composure, "money doesn't change who a person is. You were kind that night, and you're still the same person now, fancy suit or not." She paused, then added with a small smile, "Though I do hope you're not here because the coffee was that good." "Actually," Robert leaned forward slightly, "I'm here because of you, Lily. That night, you showed me something rare, genuine kindness without any expectation of reward. You stood up for someone you thought was just a poor old man, risking your job and your tips in the process." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. "But they didn't," Robert pointed out gently. "Everyone else in this diner that night stayed quiet. You were the only one who spoke up." He pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. "You also told me about your dream of opening a community center." "Oh, that?" Lily felt her cheeks warm. "That was just wishful thinking. I mean, it's not like you could actually do it." Robert raised an eyebrow. "What if I told you that you could?" Lily stared at him, not quite understanding. "What do you mean?" "I've done some research," Robert said, opening his notebook. "About you, about your community work, about your daughter. About how you manage to help others even when you barely have enough for yourself." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "I've learned that when you say you want to help people, you mean it. And I think it's time someone helped you make that dream a reality." Lily felt her heart start to race. "Mr. Wellington, please." He held up a hand, smiling. "Call me Robert. After all, we shared meatloaf together." His eyes twinkled. "Now, how about we discuss how to make that community center of yours come to life?" Lily's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee into Robert's cup. The diner had emptied out, leaving them alone with their conversation. The evening light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. "I don't understand," she said, setting down the coffee pot. "Why would you want to help me? There must be thousands of better qualified people who could run a community center." Robert took a sip of his coffee, then placed a thick folder on the table between them. "Better qualified on paper, perhaps. But qualifications aren't everything. Tell me, what would you do first if you had the resources to open this center?" Without hesitation, Lily began speaking, her eyes lighting up with passion. "Well, we'd need an after-school program. So many parents in the neighborhood work late, and their kids have nowhere safe to go. We could help with homework, serve healthy snacks." She caught herself, blushing. "Sorry, I get carried away sometimes." "No, please continue," Robert encouraged, opening the folder. "What else?" "Computer classes for seniors. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, always says she wishes she could video chat with her grandchildren in California. And job training workshops. There's so many skilled people in our community who just need a chance to learn new things or update their skills." She paused, then added softly, "Maybe even a small library. Books changed my life when I was young." Robert nodded, pulling out several documents. "Everything you're saying aligns perfectly with what this neighborhood needs. I've had my team conduct a community survey." He slid a paper across the table. "Look familiar?" Lily gasped as she recognized the old building in the photograph. "That's the abandoned center I was telling you about. But it's so expensive, and the repairs." "All taken care of," Robert said simply. "I've already had my team inspect it. The building is structurally sound. It just needs some work to bring it up to code. But here's my proposal, Lily, and I want you to think carefully about it. He laid out 3 more documents. First, I'll buy the building and fund its complete renovation. Second, I'll establish an operating budget for the first 5 years. But third, and most importantly, he paused, making sure he had her full attention. I want you to go back to school and finish your business degree. Lily's mouth fell open. What? But I can't. My daughter. Work. All covered, Robert continued gently. You'll receive a full scholarship, plus a living stipend that matches your current income from both jobs. This will allow you to focus on your studies and spend more time with your daughter. Meanwhile, we'll hire a temporary director to get the center up and running, with you working closely with them to learn the ropes. But why? Lily whispered, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. Because giving money is easy, Robert replied. What's harder, and more valuable, is investing in people who will use that money wisely to help others. This isn't charity, Lily. It's an investment in you and your community. Once you complete your degree, you'll take over as executive director. He pulled out one final document. There's just one condition. As you succeed, I want you to look for others like yourself. People with dreams of helping their communities, but lacking the resources to do so. You'll help identify them, mentor them, and together we'll create a network of community centers that truly make a difference. Lily stared at the papers, her vision blurring slightly with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Robert smiled. Take these documents home. Review them with your daughter. Sleep on it. This isn't a decision to make lightly. He stood up, straightening his jacket. I'll come back tomorrow evening for your answer. As he walked toward the door, he turned back. Oh, and Lily? That night, when you stood up for a stranger in old clothes. You weren't just defending me. You were showing me exactly the kind of person I've been looking for to lead this project. Someone who does the right thing simply because it's right. After he left, Lily sat in the quiet diner, looking at the stack of papers that could change her life forever. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, twinkling with possibility. 1 year had passed since that life-changing evening in the diner. Lily sat in her small campus library study room, surrounded by textbooks and her laptop showing financial spreadsheets. Her business management textbook lay open beside a stack of community center progress reports. The sunlight streaming through the window caught the silver pendant Robert had given her on her first day of classes, a tiny key symbolizing new beginnings. Mom. Her daughter's excited voice broke through her concentration as the little girl burst into the study room, fresh from the center's after-school program. You won't believe what happened today. We started a garden in the backyard of the center. Miss Amy showed us how to plant tomatoes and peppers. Lily smiled, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. The past year had brought so many changes, but moments like these made everything worth it. That's wonderful, sweetie. Did you remember to thank Miss Amy? Of course. And guess what else? Mr. Chen from next door came to teach us Tai Chi in the morning. He says it helps old and young people stay healthy. Her daughter's eyes sparkled with excitement. Can we do Tai Chi together sometime? As soon as I finish these finals, Lily promised, glancing at her textbooks. She was maintaining a 3.9 GPA while still spending every afternoon at the community center, learning from the temporary director and helping implement new programs. Her phone buzzed. A message from Robert. Meeting in an hour. Has some exciting news about the center's success. The community center had exceeded everyone's expectations. What started as a simple after-school program had blossomed into something extraordinary. Local professionals volunteered their time to teach classes. Everything from basic computer skills to cooking healthy meals on a budget. The small library Lily had dreamed of now had over 3,000 books, all donated by community members and local businesses. Packing up her study materials, Lily and her daughter made their way to the center. The old building had been transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls, and children's artwork decorated every available space. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the halls. Senior citizens chatting in the computer lab, teenagers helping younger kids with homework, and the gentle thump of basketballs from the newly renovated gym. In the main office, Robert waited with his ever-present notebook and a proud smile. Lily, just the person I wanted to see. Have you checked the local news today? She shook her head, setting down her backpack. Been buried in finals prep all day. Why? The city council voted unanimously to use our center as a model for 5 new locations across the city, he announced, his eyes twinkling. They were particularly impressed by our senior computer literacy program and the job training workshops. 3 of our participants have already found full-time employment. Lily sat down, overwhelmed by the news. 5 new centers. That's amazing. And guess who they want to consult on the project? Robert smiled. Your practical experience combined with your business education makes you the perfect advisor. Once you graduate next year, of course. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve. Mom, can I go help Mrs. Wu with the reading circle? The little kids love it when I do the funny voices. Go ahead, sweetheart, Lily smiled, watching her daughter skip away. Turning back to Robert, she asked, Did you ever imagine it would work out this well? Actually, yes, he replied softly. The moment you stood up for a stranger in shabby clothes, I knew you had the heart for this work. The business skills, those can be taught. But genuine compassion and dedication to helping others, that's rare and precious. Through the office window, they watched as a group of elderly residents practiced Tai Chi in the courtyard, while children tended to the new garden beds nearby. A teenager was helping a grandmother navigate a video chat with her family, both of them laughing together at some shared joke. We're not just building a community center, Lily realized, her voice filled with quiet joy. We're building bridges between people, between generations. We're giving people hope and tools to build better lives. Robert nodded, closing his notebook. And this is just the beginning. Just wait until you see what the next year brings. 3 years had passed since that fateful evening in the diner. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Lily's office at the main community center, where she sat reviewing applications for their newest initiative. On her desk stood a framed photo of her graduation day. She was beaming in her cap and gown, her daughter and Robert standing proudly beside her. A knock on her door made her look up. Come in. Robert entered, looking exactly as he had that first night in his expensive suit, though now his presence felt familiar, almost family-like. Ready for the big announcement. Lily stood, smoothing her blazer nervously. As ready as I'll ever be. I still can't believe we're opening our 10th center. They walked together through the bustling hallways of what had become known as the Heart of Hope Community Center. Children rushed past them heading to their after-school programs, while in the computer lab, elderly residents were having their weekly technology class. The smell of fresh bread wafted from the culinary training kitchen, where unemployed community members were learning skills for food service careers. Remember when you thought this was just a dream? Robert asked softly as they passed the library, now home to over 10,000 books and a popular weekend storytelling program run by Lily's daughter. Sometimes I still think I'm dreaming, Lily admitted, pausing to straighten a child's artwork on the wall. Yesterday, I met a woman who learned computer skills here and just got promoted to office manager at her company. Her kids come to our after-school program, and now she volunteers teaching basic computer skills to other parents. They reached the main hall, where hundreds of community members had gathered for the special announcement. Camera crews from local news stations set up their equipment. The success of their community center model had caught national attention. As Lily took the stage, she saw familiar faces in the crowd. There was Mr. Chen, who had expanded his Tai Chi classes to include gentle exercise programs for seniors. Mrs. Wu, whose reading circle had grown into a full-fledged literacy program for both children and adults. Even some of the original after-school kids, now teenagers, who helped tutor younger children. 3 years ago, Lily began, her voice clear and confident. I was a waitress with a dream. I wanted to create a place where everyone in our community could grow, learn, and support each other. Thanks to one person who believed in that dream, and thanks to every single one of you who helped make it reality, we've created something extraordinary. She gestured to the screens behind her, showing photos of their 9 existing centers across the city. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that we're not just opening our 10th center, we're expanding to 5 new cities across the country. Each center will be led by someone from their local community, someone with the same dream of making a difference. The crowd erupted in applause. Robert watched from the side, his eyes twinkling with pride. He remembered the shy waitress who had stood up to bullies in his defense, never knowing who he was. Now she stood before hundreds, a respected community leader who had never lost her humble heart. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, Lily's daughter, now a poised 12-year-old, helped serve refreshments, just as she had in the soup kitchen years ago. "Mom," she called out, "Mrs. Baker wants to know if she can start a quilting class for the grandmas to teach the kids. She says it'll help keep traditions alive." Lily smiled, making a note in her planner. "Tell her we'll discuss it at the next community meeting. Everyone's voice matters here." Later that evening, as the crowds dispersed, Robert found Lily in her office, already working on plans for the new centers. "You know," he said, settling into a chair, "I visit all our centers regularly, usually in my old clothes. Want to know what I've discovered?" Lily looked up, curious. "What's that?" "In every single one, I see you. Not physically, but in the spirit of the place. The way everyone is treated with respect, the focus on practical help and genuine caring. You've created more than just community centers, Lily. You've created places where hope lives." Lily glanced at the photo on her desk, then out her window where the sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors. In the playground below, children played while their parents chatted nearby, elderly neighbors walked the garden paths, and teenagers helped unload donations for the food pantry. "You know what the best part is?" she said softly. "Somewhere out there, right now, someone else is dreaming about making their community better. And now, we can help make their dream come true too."